My name is Joe Carbonera, and lucky for you guys, my day job is not telling jokes. I am the editorial director for Food Service Equipment and Supplies magazine. We're a small trade publication that comes out 12 times a year, and hopefully many of you read it. They've asked me to come here today and help moderate a panel discussion with two very esteemed food service consultants, and I will let them introduce themselves. Ted, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'm Ted Doyle. I'm the principal with Rica Design Studios, and I am out of the Texas market.
Hi, I'm Lance Brooks. I'm with Food Service Design Professionals. I'm local in Dallas. I'm the president.
Thank you both. Now we're going to go through, I have a handful of questions here that we're going to try and go through. When you guys, all right. Hey, come on. Now I want you to think about this when we get to the very end here, we're going to talk about this now. For Christmas, is it turkey or ham? I want you guys to think about it. Everyone else has already answered. You two are the only two that haven't answered yet. It's a tight race right now. All right. So we have a handful of questions that we're going to go through today. We're going to tackle a variety of things about how food service design has evolved over the past 5 years. We want to look at the growing influence of AI in food service operations and food service design, and hear what people are seeing, hear what our consultants are seeing in the market. We want to talk about, some of the key trends in terms of, how are we making designs more effective and more efficient when you're dealing with things like labor shortages or even less skilled labor than before. And we also want to answer your questions. So as we go through this, if you guys have questions that you'd like to hear from the consultants, please raise your hand. We're happy to bring it in. You don't know what's on these sheets, only the three of us do, so you won't be disappointed if we don't get all through it. So if we have a really great conversation with you guys between Ted and Lance here, I think it'll be a great use of time. So with that in mind, Ted, I want to start with you. Thinking about how the last 5 years or so have evolved, what design elements are non-negotiable now than compared that weren't, say, 5 years ago?
So for us, since COVID, I guess, I'm going to say since COVID, with the markets getting tighter, I think what we're starting to see is when you start a project, you work through a program with the owner. At least for us, separate from equipment, you've got to stick with that. You can't vary from it at all. The cost of these jobs nowadays is so extreme that, every project that we have, we go through a value engineering phase at the end of it. You're trying to make sure that you're managing those budgets for the projects from start to finish. It's really becoming a big, you just can't deviate out of it. As you're going through each phase of the project, you're checking budgets as we go. And as they advance, as they grow, you have to have really an honest conversation with clients of, listen, I know you want this, just so you know, it's going to be out of budget. And, once they know that, once they understand that, then you can kind of keep the project on track. For us, at least, that's the biggest thing.
Lance, what are staples now in your design today that maybe weren't as common 5 years ago?
So I think, obviously COVID changed a lot of the design and how we do things, but high level, we're still doing the same design we have done. We're still able to meet the requirements of the business, but getting more granular. What now is non-negotiable, this just been recently in a couple of years, which a few of y'all know, is really on our walk-in cooler systems. We have been experiencing staff doing traveling, and I'm claustrophobic. I don't like doing punches in the freezer because I know normally it's not working 100%. But seeing my staff being stuck in the freezer and not being able to get out of the emergency release really has heightened the situation. And when you get a school district calling you saying, "Hey, get these freezers working," or we're not going to do it, it's kind of pushed us to go above and beyond the requirements of what a normal freezer spec is. So we're kind of seeing that as a life safety thing. So, everything else has been it's still evolving, but that's one thing past couple of years we're really highlighting and pushing and continuing evolving that specification.
What about more higher tech equipment lands like combi, right? You do a lot of school work, and for a long time, longest time, schools was primarily convection ovens, steamers, that sort of thing. Are you putting more combis into schools now?
So we are seeing more combi ovens. We partially like combi ovens, but it's almost like buying a car. You want a Ford or you want a Chevy on the Dodge. With the Dallas area, it's all about the water quality. We do everything from a combi oven. You gotta treat the water when you go down the summer. We think combi oven is a very universal piece of equipment, but if we can't get the contractor installed right, we can't get the water quality right, probably not the best piece of equipment for your location. So it is a talking piece of, is that the right equipment for your application?
And Ted, for your designs, I think too that, you know, one of the things that's kind of come up in some of our conversations is the importance of making your designs so flexible, right? Because things are changing so much for operators. Talk about the importance of flexibility. Because you think you start with one thing when it opens, but things could change in 6 months, right?
Yeah, when we always start the project, we sit down with their operator, whoever it happens to be, whether it's internal, external. And we always have the conversation, what's your main thing? What do you want to do here? But we all know that in 6 months, the operator may lose their contract, and you have a new operator, or the chef may move on, and they want to change their menu. And the worst thing that we can do is have the client calls and say, we got to rip this whole thing out because, you know, we need a new menu. So when we're looking at it, we're trying to make these platforms as flexible as possible. We're trying to make the kitchen as flexible as possible. So hot, cold wells, refrigerator freezers, iVario units, combi ovens, things that you can do multiple menus with the same piece of equipment. Right? And I had mentioned earlier how tight the food service spaces are getting. You know, a lot of times you can take like a, you know, if you've got a combi oven, maybe you eliminate the fryer. Now you just don't have the space, or excuse me, the steamer. Or if you have an iVario, maybe you can use that for a pasta cooker or a fryer, right? And it's more of trying to give them flexibility and reducing the space, at least for our clients. That's what they're always looking for. How do we get our footprint smaller? How do we reduce costs?
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think always in design, flexibility is key. Sometimes we'll get the opportunity, but it's, as a designer, it's our job to at least include flexibility because we don't change that for each.
Yeah. Let's talk about equipment trends. Ted, any particular equipment trends that are coming to starting to gain traction? I know the term automation is becoming a pretty big buzzword. Is that part of the trends that you're seeing gain traction in your world?
It is. It's kind of funny for me, at least. It seems like a clear line, because I have some clients that want as much automation as they can, and then I have other clients that are like, listen, all I want is a button and a switch. You know, I want all that other stuff out. So it's really a conversation up front. And I always say, and maybe it's just my age, that, you know, I pull out my phone and say, listen, every one of your employees has this, and they can all work this. I know they can work that. But some of them just want to stay away from it. They want to stay away. The others that want automation, you know, they get really jazzed up about like iVarios, combi ovens. You know, I've got one client that wants as many robots as they can in their kitchen. They're even looking for robots to clean the floors. You know, we're having labor issues. Can you find me a robot that can clean my floor in the kitchen? Right? So, you know, and then on the design side, now all of a sudden you got all these things that have to plug somewhere, have to plug in. You know, the spaces that you don't typically think about. We've got to start, you know, looking at spaces where these things go when they're parking and sitting. You know, if you have a cashless operation or like an Amazon to go space, now all of a sudden we're charged with giving them IT closets in the back of the kitchen because it's separate from all the other IT closets, right? So you have to start designing for those spaces. and have those conversations, so.
How about you, Lance? What are some technologies, equipment technologies that you're starting to see gain some traction?
Yeah, I think, obviously the past 5 years, combi ovens been a big piece of that. I think just due to our market, labor shortage, staff rollover, need to be able to train quickly, but because they're set, so you just have to push the button type deal. But past year or two, really the Elvira has been very popular. And I think it's been kind of a double-edged sword is, it's very universal, which is great, but as a designer, and sorry, contractors that are here, one thing that doesn't get worked enough in the field is our trench liners. So it's really hard to tell a contractor to move a trench liner after it's installed because if it gets done, it's going to be done right. It's going to be a trade. But for us, there's a big sell on adding flexibility to your kitchen. As soon as you put a trench liner in, you lose your flexibility. So it's kind of be up front, but on the back side, you get a piece of equipment that's more universal, more things, digital, has menus. So for us, that's probably been the biggest piece recently that's we're seeing.
Yeah, one of the, along that line, one of the things that we have to deal with too is connectivity. And, we've got a lot of clients that want everything going to their building management system, walk-ins, remote refrigeration. They want to be able to monitor their exhaust hoods. We've got one client in Texas that monitors their exhaust hoods on a daily basis. They got some person sitting in a room just watching the exhaust hoods because it's a project that big, and it affects their operating costs. I do a lot of food processing facilities. So a lot of times they want every piece connected to their IT system. They want Bluetooth because they're monitoring how long a particular product is sitting in a walk-in or sitting in a refrigerator, and they want to be able to monitor it. So the connectivity in the kitchen is really a big thing as well. And then when you deal with hospitals, just the orders coming down from the rooms, how they get transmitted to the kitchens. Used to be have a ticket, somebody run it down, it's no longer, you got the kitchen display systems in there, all that needs to be connected to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of connectivity that's going on.
And talk about connectivity just a little bit more, because it's a concept that's not really new, right? It's been around for a really, really long time. Jasmine started talking about it with its data protocol back in the mid-90s, but it's really been slow to catch on in the food service industry. Why are they, I'm happy to hear that they're doing it. What's driving this interest?
I think it would catch on a lot faster. My personal opinion is it's being slowed down by a lot of the manufacturers. Each one of the manufacturers has their own platform. I get it. They want, to be able to monitor and help you out. But our clients aren't wanting that. They're one point. We want to be able to control it. We want to be able to see. They don't want to pay. It's kind of your Netflix, Hulu kind of bill. We don't want to have 6 different or 20 different, or, in some of these kitchens, you got thousands of pieces of equipment. They don't want that additional cost. They want to be able to, have it in one place. And I get pushed back a lot because of that. I also find that a lot of our higher tech companies don't want to connect it. They're like, you got to take that out of there. We know what people can do with that. We don't want to.
Yeah.
If somebody can connect to a Bluetooth on our, we got it. So it's really strange, but that's some of our clients. That's what we get.
Well, when you start, I'm sure there's a bunch of you out there as we're having this conversation about connectivity. A bunch of you are thinking back to like the data breach of Target, from 10 or 15 years ago, where they weren't holding the way through on HVAC. I'm hoping they got in there. Point is that scared. I know that scared a lot of people for a long time, but there is a lot of benefit to it. But Ted, you're doing a lot of work in healthcare, for example, where data sensitivity is, because of HIPAA and so many other reasons, is sky high. So maybe it's interesting to hear that maybe some people are getting a little bit more interested in it.
Yeah, if they can control it internally with their own system, their own people, they love it. If it goes out to a third party, they're not really happy with it.
Yeah, I recall sitting standing in a booth at an Apple show. I don't know if it was this one or the one before, and there was looking at a new piece of equipment. And I was talking to the manufacturer about it, and I asked him, I'm like, well, is this, NAFTA data protocol compliant? Do you have connectivity? He goes, yeah, he goes, we don't talk about it. He goes, we build them all that way. We never talk about that as a feature anymore because it does scare off a lot of people. If it gets brought up, we'll let them know that it's there. But I thought that was a really fascinating thing. Lance, anything like connectivity in your projects? Are you starting to see more with that?
Yes and no. That is a sensitive subject because when NAFTA protocol came out, everything had to be hardwired or Cat5. And in the school system, we mostly have CD walls. So there's not like good internet as being locked in the freezer, trying to call somebody out to breathe next to impossible. So, we are providing equipment with Ruffins to have that connection for the future. Again, for the future flexibility. We do have equipment that most installers or owners don't know they have. Just machines we are still providing that now. I think for a K-12 market, I don't think they want that to go out in the cloud, but it needs to be a closed system. And the problem is that who's going to control it? You're struggling to have manpower to operate the kitchens now. It's like, okay, so we're going to watch all the controls and refrigeration is probably the biggest one that we see that we do want to put in. One that's being forced right now is your exhaust fans with the DFDs. That's a requirement you have to have. We don't offer up the service to what the food service department takes control of that because that's way above their services and that's more maintenance side. So it's there. It's just when does all that get incorporated into the K-12 umbrella? And it's coming, but how much is that going to take influence?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the reasons that some of this connectivity, data security is a big one, and the chains are not really pushing it. They're very concerned about data security. I've been in a couple of conversations with them. I think the other thing, the reason connectivity hasn't been done is like monitoring things through dashboards, create multiple dashboards or even a concise one. If you're operating in a chain environment, there's certain things that if you're a franchisee for McDonald's or Wendy's or whatever, there's things they're asking you to do on a daily basis and monitor and report back up to corporate. And some of these guys are like, yeah, I don't have time to look at one more thing right now because things are so complicated, or the chain doesn't want to be known as the one where someone sat in the parking lot and they were with their laptop and they were able to hack into the system. So I think there's a few different things there. The technology's finally got better too, where at first the technology was so fickle or so unstable, not stable, delicate, I think is the better way of saying it. Kitchens are places of extreme heat, steam, grease, and that sort of thing, which is really, when we're talking about computerized technology, that's its enemy, right? None of those things really go well. Well, we've gotten to the point now where we've solved for so much of that now. There's so much computerization in so much of the equipment that's living in there, and they found ways to make this connect. But I think that data security and consolidation, I think, those are the last 2 miles that need to be solved.
Yeah, I think at some point, mentioned K-12. I think at some point some of these bigger school systems are going to have centralized monitoring of all their schools, and there's going to be one person who's just going to deal with it and be connected into each one of the schools. I can just see it going that way. I know some of our corporate accounts are doing that. They're starting to pull that kind of connectivity in. So it wouldn't surprise me if everybody else is not far behind.
Once we're talking, go ahead, Liz.
One thing I think happened this year, I know that the students, they cut the Wi-Fi out for different owners, which I agree 100%. And if I recall correctly, that there are some kitchens that are affected because their POS system. So, it's coming down the road, but how is all this going to play out? If the school really does that.
You're exactly right. So Yeah, how do you deal with that? Because particularly schools are, I think, the best example of the dynamic and the testing of boundaries is amazing there. Some with teenagers, for example, they do all their schoolwork now at school all days on their iPads, right, and on their tablets and that sort of thing. But then there's always someone in there who gets the assignment done early, who's trying to watch Netflix in class, and then the teacher figures that out, and they hit a button, and then they cancel the whole class's access to everything. So then the teacher goes and he or she goes and has coffee or leaves for the day, and they forget to unlock that for everybody. So now I have crying teenagers at my kitchen table trying to figure out how to do their homework because because their teacher shut off all their apps or that sort of thing. So it's a real dynamic environment where they have to figure out, you're seeing 2 or 3 maybe wireless networks in those facilities, but that's an investment. That's an infrastructure investment they have to be willing to do. Where does food service fit into that? So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, there's connectivity options out there. Let's do it, right? It's a complicated thing, and those types of things are happening in every type of environment that there are out there. Ted, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of it too is just driven by labor. We're trying to figure out a way to make these kitchens as efficient as possible and to reduce the amount of labor that they have. Because every one of them, I can't think in the last 4 or 5 years that I've had a client say, we've got plenty of people working for us. We don't have that issue. Right? They're trying to make it as efficient as possible. How do we reduce whatever process they're doing? And I think connectivity and making equipment more efficient and making it multifunctional is all based on that surrounding the water.
Well, and getting them comfortable with it too, right? When we talked, as in preparation for this, we talked about how a lot of your folks, for the longest time, really weren't comfortable with things like combi ovens. But now, once they start getting familiar with the benefits, they become a heck of a lot more interested in having them in these projects, don't they?
Yeah, so I think with anything, as technology grows, there is a comfort level, and I think it's more than, I'm not here to sell a piece of equipment or a feature. It's our job to educate the end user of, this is what it can do, let's go to a place, see it, experience it, do you like it, is this something you can utilize? That's our job, to go that route, and that way the user can make an educated decision. But back in the day, it was give me a convection oven with media controls, or just standard steamer. Turn it on, let's blow and go. So that's fine. We still have that, and that's really the end user direction. If that's what they want, then it's our job to get them what they're asking for.
Ted, you had touched on something earlier that you said you're starting to see more of, and that's robotics. More interest in robotics in some of your projects. Tell me in terms of what is interesting now, and I guess the bigger question that I have is, why are they interested in it now? Like, why hasn't this caught on? Like, there's anybody younger in the audience, turn to a baby boomer and ask them about the Jetsons, right? All the baby boomers in the audience grew up watching Rosie the Robot make burgers, cooking for George, right, on the Jetsons. And we all thought by the time 2025 hit, Rosie the Robot would be everywhere, and we'd have nobody working in kitchens. Well, it's the complete opposite. There are really very few robots anywhere right now. Rosie is in that timeshare I discussed earlier down in Florida hanging out. So we just haven't seen the advent of robots. So why haven't we, and why do you think some people are starting to show some interest?
Well, I think why we haven't is I don't think the technology is quite there yet. I think there's still a gap. But I think the way we're being pushed is, again, it's because of labor. I mean, we're working on I won't say what project it is, but it's a big university that is trying to figure out what they charged us with is, we want to design this to have no staff in here. And we want as many vending type applications as we can. And they said, just go out and find it. You've got this room, it's this size, and put as many of these self-op vending machines in here from everything. Like coffee, pizza, salad, everything that you could find. We want to try every one of them. And we want to be able to connect to it. We want to know monitor its sales rates, we want to monitor the food in there, we want everything that you can monitor. And it is literally that. It's a room with just surrounded on the perimeter with vending machines and an IT closet. And they're going to train folks to come in and deal with it.
Wow.
And see where technology leads them. So there are some pieces out there that I've found that you can put into a facility that the problem is like if there's some coffee units out there that are all robotic, right?
Yeah.
The problem is they can restock them and they can use them, but when they break down, they don't have anybody to fix them. So now you just have this unit sitting there and it looks like it's not working. So I get a lot of pushback on that. So I think that's where the gap is. The technology is still working that way. A lot of the clients that I have are interested in it, especially corporate clients, because they don't want to open up their servery to staff that is there at 10 o'clock at night. They want to be able to come down to the micro market and get their own and just swipe a card and pay for it, right? It's on honor system. You're not going to lose your job you're not going to walk off with a cup of coffee because you don't want to lose your job for that, right? So, they do that, but they also want it to be non-staffed, and we want to give them variety. So what can we do? What can we put in? And that's what the university is looking at too. So, how can we help this side of the technology of food service?
Yeah. Lance, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, the K-12, I don't foresee robotics. It's just such a big monster financially when repair. Last thing I would want to see is put a robotic in there and it breaks down and we're so EJ all week. But, micro markets, yes, anything like self-service, self-checkout, we are seeing those, but I think it's going to be a while until we see robotics.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. And I think that in some of the projects that Ted's talking about, when you look at things like college, where it's closer to a 24/7 kind of operation, where you're looking at corporate dining, where you're dealing with multiple shifts, which again gets you to 24/7, or even healthcare for that matter. Some of those things I think really start making a lot more sense. You get to that ROI, I think, a little bit quicker. I'm of the opinion that unattended retail is about to explode. We're hearing more and more conversations about it. We're starting to see some more focused solutions. There's a robotic coffee arm out there, a company in Ohio is selling, and they're using it. Like a lot of hospitals have gotten on board with it to be able to provide fresh coffee for third shift workers, and it makes all the sense in the world. So I think that's one thing that we're starting to see. I know healthcare is starting to explore a little bit more of unattended retail in the form of like Amazon, just walk out, how do you structure that, and those sorts of things. I'm seeing some nods, so you guys are seeing it too, which is really good. I think the big issue, there's a couple of issues why we haven't seen robotics more. First issue, I think, is ROI. It's cost. It's really, really expensive. And to get to that ROI, you guys know when you're specifying a piece of equipment, like what's the ROI they have in a combi? Well, a robot is way more expensive than a combi. So the areas where we've seen it work, where they're getting that ROI, is mostly robots that are serving as delivery vehicles and tugs, where they're able to send that around to multiple departments. So, for example, Ohio State University Western Medical Center, University of California, San Francisco Medical Center, two that I know particularly well, they have robotic tugs that they're using during the day. They're delivering room service meals to patients, and at night they're hauling the dirty and clean linens all around campus, right? So they're able to spread that out a little bit and make things a little bit easier. That's, I think, why it's able to work. Some of these others, I think, we're ways away before the ROI gets there. The second thing, I thought your point about maintenance is huge. It's no different than a fryer, a combi oven, or a dishwasher. Pick any type of piece of equipment. If you specify that the traditional equipment in a market, you can't get it serviced, that piece of equipment's not really very good for that operator, is it, right? You need to be able to do that sort of thing. Same thing with robotics. They don't really have service networks set up. So that's why we've seen, like, White Castle, I think, is one of the greatest examples of it. Everyone talks about all the stuff that they're doing with robotics, but they're only up to 100 units now. They've been doing this for 10 years. And I'm not knocking it. They're doing it. It's great. Or even Chipotle has gotten a lot of positive feedback about the avocado, which is a robotic avocado peeler and they're testing a make line, a robotic make line, but it's only like 10 units. I mean, it's a ways before some of this stuff gets out there. White Castle just yesterday debuted a slider vending machine in Logan Airport, Boston. And the thing that stands out, and the reason that I bring this up is because to do that, for White Castle to do it, they've been in other vending machines, but this is their first standalone one. But they had to collaborate with two other companies, the company that makes the vending machine and then the software company, So the long-winded point is this, it's really complicated. It's not as easy as just going to Target and buying a Roomba to sweep the floor before your parents come to visit.
Yeah. There is also that conversation you gotta have with the clients about how comfortable they are with having that front-facing versus in the back of us, right? Because if your customers, if you lose that contact with your customers and you're just dealing with a robot, and why, what makes you unique besides using the robot?
That's what I was
Right.
gonna say, sorry,
Yeah.
the human element to me is a big piece of this puzzle. And nobody wants to get rid of the lunch lady. I mean, that front facing person is huge. And also as an operator, to be able to push your heart aside and say, okay, I'm gonna put a machine in here and fire my entire staff, like, that's a hard thing to do.
It's such a hard thing.
Yeah, it's really negative PR because I even see like more of these stories that happen in some checkouts. But I went to around Thanksgiving, guess what? Those people managers because you get pushback. It's like, well, why are you trying to get rid of all of these people that have these jobs?
Yeah, well, I think they are actually scaling that back. I do have a lot of clients where they used to do the micro markets where there's no employees, it's all kind of honor. A lot of them are going back to, no, we want to have the staff, we want to have somebody in there. And even the self-checkout, things like that, they're starting, we might have it over here, but we still want to have somebody else here too, for that personal touch.
My concern is that our industry is a very personal relationship-driven industry. And that goes from us to the students. And, there is an interaction between the employee and the student, me and my client. So you can call me, talk specifically about it. And, it's scary when we talk about robotics and front face. I think there's some automation that will help. But, honestly, sometimes I get tired of, I don't want to go do a self-checkout. I just want to pick the time when I check out and talk to someone. And, it's my phone, I have my recorder, I'm now writing more than I'm using my phone on my tablet because it's just more relaxing.
Yeah.
I'm actually going almost backwards with more than we do. And we're a very technology-driven office. We have to be. But we'll do a job with a piece of roll sketch paper, we'll sketch right there. And it's just that collaboration and personal.
I think just a repetitive task, like prep, okay, wants the site to do it, wants to, part-time involved. Prep versus production, or production is much better than, special order, that's what fast food guys did, right?
Yeah.
Special orders, and they said, oh, screw that computer on I'm running on the people I know the breakers, the world, death, and all that, and they pulled the way back real fast and said, hey, this is not saving them money, it's costing them money involved. So I do think there's function for robotics. And again, if they ever go down, you can still put manually where top of them, and just shift them back and say, that's what we phone.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've found a lot of clients that they're okay with the automation, front facing, as long as there's somebody there that is engaging, right? So there's a couple, I don't know if you've seen them, kind of the tilt units that you do a lot of ramen and stuff like that in there. There's one out there now that you put all the ingredients in and you just hit a button and it'll cook it, it'll stir it, it'll dispense it, it'll rinse it out and get it ready for the next one. But there's always tends to be a staff member there to be able to engage with the client I think those things, the customers, or at least our customers, are a lot more confident than just, all right, here's a coffee robot, or here's a pizza vending machine or something like that. And no matter how much you tell their customers it's all fresh food, it still feels vending machine, right? So,
Well, it's interesting because
Most robots ever seen with LA, that LA area and all the food halls.
Yeah.
So you have like 15 different kitchens there. They just go by and picks up the kitchen, picks the bags up, brings it to the front. Yes, on the front that's actually working with the customers, but they're handing the robots in the streets in LA. I don't think in LA, but there's more robots delivering food than there are people for sure.
But you're starting to see that delivery companies expand those robots. I know that Shake Shack just expanded what it's doing in Chicago with delivery robots, and there's some areas where you see it quite a bit. But I think the point you made earlier about so many variables that are out there, which I think is interesting. There's one case or one test case out there right now that's kind of blowing this all up a little bit, which is what Sweetgreen is doing with its Infinite Kitchen, which is fascinating because it's what it does is it's an automated make line that some athletes at MIT developed once upon a time, and they sold it to Sweetgreen. Now Sweetgreen just sold it to somebody else, which is really interesting. But when they first started doing it, all the prep was done. Still by people, in-house by hand. And then the robot, everything would roll out the make line. It would cook the proteins, and cook the vegetables, the rice, or whatever. So it's really interesting. It was a fascinating thing to me to think that they were still doing prep by hand, because I thought that would be the first thing that would go. But it's interesting. These things take space, they take money, they take time. We're starting to see Aramark just released its automatic robotic kitchen. They call it the ARC. It's a bowl making concept. It's a bowl making robot they have that can make, I think it's up to 4 bowls at a time with choosing from over 80 ingredients that they're starting to test that, I think, a little bit right now. So there's some different things that are coming. I don't know where this all shakes out. I think, because as part of this conversation, you look at what Starbucks and what Panera are doing. Starbucks closed just about all of its order ahead only stores, off premises only, order ahead only locations, because they weren't performing. I think coming out of the pandemic, we were all really transaction oriented. Now that we've resumed our lives and our lives have picked up speed, having that interaction and that hospitality clicks a little bit more sometimes. So they're not doing that as much. The Panera CEO is on record saying we have to go back to what makes a restaurant, and it's that hospitality. They wanted to go all in on kiosks ordering for the longest time, and they hybrided now, where they have 3 or 4 kiosks in the location right now, but you can still walk up to the register and order from Claire, and she'll take care of you. So it's a real interesting time. Like, I want to come back in 5 years, right before I retire, and have this conversation again and see kind of where we're at with it. Yes.
There's a video we recently watched, a couple in China. Obviously, cities. There's a city there in China. It's actually a pretty large city now. That it's supposed to be already in years 4. And everything's automated. All the cars are automated. You can't understand the driver. But the restaurant they went to, they have robots that serve you. So a robot comes with a covered dish and you take it off and take your plate. But the staff, it frees them up to just visit with their patrons. And so they just walk around and talk to you, take your order on iPad, just walk. They never have to go to the kitchen or robots and stuff. It gives them the ability to have one interaction. So some people like that. They have drones that, like, you can order something on your phone and you go to a designated area that, like, we have vending machines that drone will land them and dispense whatever you just ordered. But the whole city, all the high-rise buildings are LED, and they're controlled from the central source. They can send out a message across high-rise buildings.
Yeah, it's wild. Here in Texas is where we get press releases on companies testing drone delivery, and I would tell you that 90% of them are Texas-based tests, that are happening here more than certainly not happening in California. The robot on the ground deliveries, that's happening, I think, a little bit more there, particularly in metropolitan areas. It's fascinating. I think I think one of the things, you bring up a few good points, and one of the things is when we talk about automation, we think about robots and we think about AI, and I want to get to AI in a second because I think it's really important. But one of the things is we have to broaden our conversation about what we think automation is. So one of the most amazing things, and I think most potentially beneficial things that's come out of the last couple of years in terms from an automation perspective are those handheld POS systems that servers and restaurants have. Because in talking with them in terms of how much they like them, to your point about being able to interact with customers more, it gives them the ability to do that, right? They don't have to write it on a piece of paper. Wait, was the ranch on the side with that or what? You know, they don't have to go to another part of the dining room to put it in. They put it in and it's firing there, and they can tell you some bad jokes or listen, you know, right there with you and build that relationship. And they say that it makes them more efficient. They feel like their hospitality is a little bit better. Maybe not everybody's seeing that, but I think that's a real interesting thing. Another thing when it comes to automation, when we talk about, you know, automation is just taking a task from an operation and just removing it and having someone or something else do it. So in the case of operators, for example, maybe you're moving, if you have a commissary kitchen and you're moving all your prep to a commissary kitchen, and then you're sending the ingredients back out to where they're getting cooked. Or maybe you're working with your broadline, you know, the broadline distributor, your food company, to prep the chicken or the vegetables in a certain way. So then you guys are just cooking and assembling to order on an operator basis. Those are forms of automation that are very prevalent today that we don't always think about, that I think it's really important that we remember that.
Yeah, we have one client at K through 12 that are looking at, you've seen little smartwatches that issuing all the kids in school smartwatches. So when they're going through the line, their menu or their ability to buy lunch is loaded up on this thing. Their parents monitor it, so if little Johnny has peanut allergy, he goes to buy a peanut butter sandwich and he's checking out and he just scans the smartwatch and says, no, you can't have that. And somebody there will say, you can't have that, go back and get it. But also they're monitoring the, making sure he eats during the day. You know, it's going back to the family, it's going to the food service. They can tell, okay, we sold 22 bananas today. This is our average. And I don't know how I feel about that, but, they issue them to the kids and they're,
But it's similar to what we're seeing in healthcare though too, right? When you check in, if you're one of those people that stays a couple of days, like they know if you're on a diabetic diet, cardiac diet, what your food allergies are, if you have certain religious requirements for food, so when you call and you order room service, it all connects to that, which I think is fascinating. So it's interesting to see it making over that way. Another point.
What ours are doing, taking watch on time to.
Right?
Work the system.
I just think that companies that want to innovate, they just need to hire teenagers and lock them in. Like in Big, right? We saw that in the Tom Hanks movie Big once upon a time, where they said here, like they thought he was an adult, but he was sitting in there, I like this toy for this reason. Now, give it to a teenager. If you want to see if something can be broke or worked around, we'll figure it out for you. Let's talk. Go ahead.
Maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but I think the automation, the whole AI deal, it's here, but it's scary. But I think it's one thing to think about. It's a tool and a resource on how you do your job or live your life versus thinking of it's going to place. I think, I've dabbled in it. I've gone down the rabbit hole. It's fun. It's scary. But, again, it's a tool. It's just how to use that tool is up to you that helps you do your job.
So Vance, great segue into this because that was our next topic. Talk a little bit about talk about your time in the rabbit hole. Talk about, that sounded weird. Talk about, no, Lance, I don't want to talk about what happened in the 60s. But talk about your time in the rabbit hole, working with, what are some of the things where you've seen AI work for you? What are some of the things you tested with it?
So, we're careful with AI. We don't use it for design. For me, the design and relationship is personal, and it's for us to build a relationship and we do this make sure we get the client. But AI, if I'm, writing a summary, and more often now that my formatting's off, or I'm just can't think something, AI kick it back out. Oh, that sounds better. I'm gonna update my stuff, but it doesn't do anything that I do on a daily basis. We did use it a couple years ago for a presentation to come up with some, I think it was a 70s theme. So give me a 70s theme picture of disco. And it kicked a bunch out. I'm like, well, that's great. I could never do that with a higher graphic article. But to use it, say, create a spec for this product.
Just not.
It's a disservice to the work.
Ted, what are your thoughts on AI?
Well, we are really looking at it internally just because of, there's a lot of legal liability that goes along with this stuff. So internally, we use it somewhat, but if you don't actually own a seat or a platform or whatever it is to ChatGPT or whatever it is, and you type something in, hey, give me this, or I got a project with this many seats, how can I program it that? All that's public. That just goes out on the internet, and everybody. We have to sign a lot of NDAs, and we don't want that stuff out there. So internally, we really control it pretty hard on our side. But I can say our younger staff use it quite a bit, and I am amazed at what they can use it for. And like you said, a lot of times they'll write up an email and somebody will put it into that just to check grammar and to reword it and to, I don't know, make us look smarter, I guess, right? But we haven't used it for design. We have used it for like presentations. There's a couple AI sites out there that you put in, what you want to talk about, and it will populate with photos and bullet points, and it'll really formulate this presentation. All you have to go back in is modify it a bit. And it's a way for, we're not unusual with anybody else. We're looking, how do you be more efficient with what you do? So for us, it's more of an internal thing, not an external. Like Lance said, I just can't imagine laying down a presentation in front of a client and, we did, AI did it. I just can't imagine it working. Not yet, but I'm sure it will. I think of like walk-in coolers and freezers and saying, all right, I've got this 10 by 10, but the most efficient shelving layout inside. Give me the spec for it, give me a budget price for it. I can't imagine it's very far off. Somebody's going to do it pretty
I think data, though, we started putting data, I know asset life cycle data, it's fantastic, right? People have trained on it, you're saying people have done it, wasn't trained. So I know a lot of, this requires a lot of concern about how to extend license from assets. Especially, you guys are designing something, but you design it to get in mind. And I think that's one thing I always look at is, you have limited, you start looking at automation and stuff, and that, who's repairing this? Is that repaired by the internal team you have? They have the parts, they have the components, they change something, you change your whole economic system of ownership. So I think those are all things I look at and say, budget conscious as people, says, I'm saving for labor, man, I'm living the same, man.
Yeah.
So I think AI does help with all those things about, hey, what type of maintenance that it's on, what the frequencies are based upon the usage. Start using that is pretty good.
Yeah, some of that modeling to understand what this is, life cycle cost, estimated life cycle, even disposal, because some of those rules are changing back and forth, and some municipalities have significant requirements about what you can and can't do, or even being able to navigate what some municipalities require. Right now, on the federal level, they've kind of, Energy Star is still there, but they kind of hit pause, and a lot of the environmental issues that the current administration isn't a big fan. And I'm not saying that's plus or minus, that just is. but that means that a lot of different things are happening at local levels right now. So what might fly in Texas is going to be different from Colorado, you know, in some of these other places. So using AI to help navigate some of that or summarize like key points, contracts, you know, action items, deadlines, date, you know, and connecting back out, I think is really important. You have a point.
Well, going back to what you were saying earlier about the AI, I work in my executive department, I do computer rendering examinations and software reviews. So we offer 3-month free trial for AI to assist in the rendering portion of it. So I went down the rabbit hole and tried it out. You have these options of different styles, you know, it was so far off what reality would do. And now they want us to pay like some ridiculous amount of money to have AI do our design. Like you said, you know, that's what we're hired to do is to redesign, not just click a button for AI. And right now it's so far off.
And that's one thing also when the school systems won't allow AI because they can do the work. And what we're seeing is when we get resumes coming in, you can tell what's AI and what's not. So you really have to be careful with it because it could do some really cool stuff, but it came from AI. But again, it's a tool, and how you use that tool is up to the user. But if we had a closed system, when that time comes, to help us improve our processes, open the system, no.
Just a quick story. So I had my grandkids out for Thanksgiving here just last week, and we were all around the table playing Scrabble. And I noticed the two middle grandkids take their phone and just take a picture of their Really? And that was giving them a list of every word that could be made from the Scrabble. It's like, what are you guys doing? There's like, well, it's AI. It's like, that ain't cheating, that's technology.
That's it.
Things are advancing, it's hard to compete with them in Scrabble when they're putting 7-letter words out in there.
Wow.
There is advancement going on. So.
Where do you find that most of your clients are sitting on like that comfort curve of AI? It's like task-based or decision-based. Like task-based is like for robots it would be prep. AI would be, I want you to do this. And then decision-based for robots, you said earlier, self-checkout, that could backfire. Catch somebody at the door like, hey man, those bananas you running up street look like PS5. so where do you find that most of your clientele sits on that comfort curve? Like where do they use it, and where, or are any of your clients using it or ask you to, we just want our kitchen to be AI. It's not a thing, but I can work on it.
I haven't had one of our, and we do some work with the tech companies, a lot of the tech companies. I haven't had one of them say that we want to integrate AI into our kitchen. I found them to be the other way. The only thing that they're wanting to use anything like that is to track inventory. I have a lot of them that want to track waste going out of the kitchen. So we put, scales, trash cans on scales so they can track that, and inventory, HACCP requirements, things like that. They're okay with that. They encourage that. But other than that, I haven't got anybody that's really, on board with it 100%.
Lance, do you? No.
No, but equipment is coming with it built in. We talk a lot about combi ovens. I can see it censoring, how much detergent will be put in there to clean it, or how much water you really need. I can see that coming down the pipe sooner than later.
Yeah, help with projections too, on how much to buy, when to buy. A couple of the things that that we're seeing is where AI can have an impact is forecasting, right? Going back over historical data for an operator and understanding peak times, helping them plan for labor, for menu, ingredients and sourcing, and that sort of thing. I think that's a really key area. We talked about, with food prep too, like not only sourcing ingredients, but figuring out, how much to prep and when and that sort of thing. So I think there's there's some areas that you can use it. You know, the test with AI on drive-through support, which is one of the more prominent ones, is hit or miss. Some are doing, I think, a little bit better with it, than others. Starbucks, with its new Green Apron plan that it has out there, what they're doing now is they're arming all their corporate stores with tablets. They have it's not necessarily AI, but they're using the tablets to do basic troubleshooting on equipment. So, for example, if one of their associates sees a certain code on an espresso maker or an ice maker or something like that, they can watch a 30-second or minute, however long the video is on the tablet, and try and do some basic repairs. And if those repairs don't resolve the issue, then they know to elevate it to service from there. So those are some different ways that maybe it could be a little bit impactful.
Yeah, I think in a few years, you're gonna pull up to a drive-through of whatever restaurant, and the person you're talking to is not a person in the drive-through. You know, I know a lot of QSRs used to think, okay, we'll have like data center where, you know, all the restaurants in Texas will be calling into one when you pull up, and well, AI is going to even eliminate that idea, right? The person you're talking to on the drive-through will just be a computer, and they're taking your order, and that's it. You're not really talking to a live person.
And the Express already does that, and it is so frustrating. It's like, no, that's not what I wanted. No, that's not what I said. So finally, I'm like, can I talk to a real person, please?
Well, and that's interesting because McDonald's is going the exact opposite way of that. They're looking at how they can innovate in the drive-through to actually create more engagement. So that's very interesting how this is exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
McDonald's pulled that back a year ago. I think they had pulled it off.
They're actually going full force. They're looking for every way that they can do in terms of engagement, like from the drive-through perspective and how they can have that customer touch and what is different. How are they different? It doesn't change the food, right? And one like again, so when you look at like a Chick-fil-A, right, and how they've got the 2 lines and how they manage what pulls that flip from a drive-through perspective, and then an innovation in that way. But they haven't actually initiated right now on innovation in the drive-through. They're trying to.
Yeah, I think everybody gets to a certain level in their automation, and they decide that, all right, we may have went too far, right? You know, the self-checkouts, we're going to pull those back. You know, now we want more customer interaction. You know, you go to Home Depot and there's a lot of people. I'm still going over here. Yeah, I want to check this 2x4 out. You know, by scanning it, I want somebody to look at it. So I can see. I mean, we have those conversations. What are their level of comfort? You know, how far do you want to push the line, and how far do you want to go? Right.
Yeah, I also think it comes down to the experience. You know, what is the brand promise? What, as an operator or even as a design consultant, what is the experience you want your customers to have when working with you? Like, I think from a dealer perspective, there's probably certain things that they can go into an online portal and just reorder and not have to call in and do it. You know, that probably would be good. And then you can maybe focus more on actual troubleshooting and problem solving or relationship building. But in some cases, maybe it is important. I think it just varies. And the point, Lance, that you're making, you're saying this without saying it, but I think it's really important. It's the technology has to work for you. You don't work for it. So where we're going to see successful implementations of technology is where you have a clear and defined objective, and it is something that you can measure against. And that's how you can evaluate whether that solution works. Period. It doesn't just because it's AI or just because it's an app or just because it's a company. It's all the same at the end of the day. It has to help you achieve whatever your business goals are, and they have to do it in a way that meets your expectations in terms of timing, sophistication, brand experience, and of course money. I mean, it all comes down to that. We're at our hour at this point. I have more questions I could ask. You guys have, for you guys who are teenagers in the audience, we can go another 6-7 minutes just to kind of get you through.
Or 4-1.
Or 4-1. Or we can just go 4-1 and be done. Do you got more questions for Lance or for Ted? No? Okay, so Lance, I'm going to ask the closing question then for these guys, and we'll put a bow on this. And they'll be here, come up and ask them. The next session in this room isn't until 1 o'clock, so you can come up and ask them. So before I ask the last questions to you guys, the other thing is Lance, Lance does a lot of work in K through 12, as you can tell, and Lance was show and tell today. So Lance brought a few show and tell things. Tell everybody what you brought with him, Lance, in case they want to come take a look, because I think it's pretty cool.
So when we acquired H2 Rice 20 years ago, in the back office, ton of banker boxes. We had to go through the process of cleaning it out like we buy new. And in there, I found 2 banker boxes of Mr. Gene Rice archives. And so this year has been an opportunity where I've been really emotionally going through them, opening all the articles, seeing really what this is. So the photographs, I have 12 of his original photographs he did prior to he opened his consulting firm. So it had been 40s, 50s. The articles range from 40s to 50s of his personal articles. He just had I got a stack of these articles like that. And I have probably Huff noses, 2 inches of hand 3D sketches he's done. And in order to get those out, I've released them to contractors, to manufacturers. But what's interesting is going through them and seeing how far advanced we've changed, but still back in the 40s and 50s, they're still talking about the same elements. Design efficiencies, how to improve labor. It's been really impactful on me having it. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to share it, let everybody see, enjoy it as much as I can. Because I really do go, there's so much of it. For me, it brings some happiness.
Yeah, thank you, Lance. If you have a second to look at it, it's worth it. It's wild. Things in terms of kitchen efficiency, there's stuff about equipment maintenance in there. For as much as our equipment has changed, you know what? Still one of the key things to keep in, like refrigeration operating, is making sure you keep those gaskets clean and replaced on a regular basis. It hasn't changed in 50, 60 years. So it's pretty wild. But thank you for sharing that. All right. So the last question that I'm going to ask you guys, as you're both FCSI consultants. That means you're independent consultants and you work, you have your companies that you work for and so forth. Lance, it's your business, Ted, you're part of a bigger company. So it's one of the great things about FCSI consultants that there's such diversity within that group. But so the question is, Lance, I'll start with you. What is one thing you wish your clients knew about you?
So I would say that, we're very relationship driven and that the owner has a voice and that voice needs to be heard because that impacts what I do and what you end up receiving.
You are their advocate.
We are your advocate, and if we don't know what you want or your feelings, your budget, then we can't give you the product that you're looking for. But yeah, when you're not in the room, we are advocating for you because there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that are not privy to you.
Excellent. Ted?
Yeah, I look at it the same way, and I try to tell our clients all the time that we're your lawyers for food service. I mean, our job is to implement what you want. And, we're not here to sell equipment. We're not here to, push you in any particular way. We want to make sure that we design your vision. And, we want them to be as open and as they can with us, and we try to be as transparent with them as we can. We try to have as much client interaction. We do request in-person client meetings. A lot of times you can do stuff with Teams or Zoom or whatever it is, but you really don't get it unless you're sitting across the table and talking to them. And we try to do that as much as we can. So,
yeah. I think that the thing I've learned about working with design consultants over the years is that the sooner they get involved in a project, the better. The more upfront operators and architects and others are about what they want out of the food service space and being truthful about what they know and what they haven't solved for yet. really is a huge difference. There is a move right now toward more plug and play and modular kind of stuff within the industry, but the reality is when you were talking about trenches earlier, Lance, and that sort of thing, there's a lot of things, if you don't get it right, on the front end, that's a lot of money in change orders later and construction fees and so forth. So I think being as honest and collaborative with these guys can really help make your dreams come true. All right, so with that, we're a couple minutes over. We're about 6-7 minutes over. So there we are again. It's there again. But on behalf of Ted and Lance, thank you for your time. So wait, before you go, guess what? Somebody gets to win this. Does everybody have a ticket? All right, you get to win this. All right, here, Ted, you're closest. You get to pick.
That's funny.
Right.
We can start with 6-7.
And they all start with 6-7. Just staying with the theme. All right. Make me wear my glasses. All right, 672. So the last three numbers, it's 672-002. We got a winner. All right. Come on up. Thanks. And if you guys have other questions for these guys, let us know. If you want, if you don't get my magazine, you'd like it, give me your card. I'd be happy to get you at it. It's free. The worst part is you have to look at my picture once a month. So sorry about that.
Always interesting.
It's a good magazine.